Maybe he had like a dumb wife. And he's like, y'all need to go to school.
God, you're the worst. Y'all, help me beat this man up in the comments, please. Welcome to the Charlotte Buzz, where we drink beer from local breweries while telling stories about the neighborhoods they're from. I'm Chrissy, and this is Drew.
And today we are drinking Northern Aggression from 11 Lakes Brewing.
Damn.
It is a New England IPA, 6.9%, and a wonderfully smooth yet hoppy IPA. Their website says, our Northern Aggression gets a huge burst of hop flavor and aroma from 2 rounds of dry hop additions. A healthy dose of flaked oats and wheat provide a wonderful mouthfeel, while Simcoe and Citra hops supply plenty of... I'll tell the flavors.
I don't know what that word
flavors
was.
later.
What type of flavors?
Exactly.
Oh. You said it in such a way.
I started the sentence not knowing it was about to tell us.
Well, you said, I'll tell the flavors later, but the I'll tell the was so mushed together that it was like oh yeah, and then there's the I'll tell the flavors. And I was like, what?
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell her. I'll tell you flavors later.
Well, you didn't help me pour this like you did last week, so.
Because I was reading.
Now, you got a little bit of foam in your glass. But.
A typical New England look to it.
I'll smile and nod like I know that, but. Good mouthfeel. As per the the words they said.
You think it had something to do with the oats and the wheat that gives it that good mouthfeel?
Maybe.
That's what I'm going to say.
That's strange. I feel like it's a little more, not carbonated, but kind of. Like it's got just a little bit more of the bubbly feel than just like totally smooth feel. Mm-hmm. I think it has a smooth like drink to it. But.
Okay.
Specific flavors. I mean, like I taste hops. I don't necessarily taste like fruity or even earthy or anything like that from last week, but it definitely way more distinctive than last week's, but also I don't know how to describe it. What do you think?
I mean, first off, it'll drink.
I
think it's pretty good.
I mean, there is that good old irony of me being the Yankee in the room and being fond of a beer called Northern Aggression.
Yeah. I
mean, I know I'm an aggressive person. I know Northerners can be aggressive. That whole, Civil War era can get a little contentious when you talk about it in the South. So I'm just going to let that ride.
So it says the Simcoe and Citra hops supply plenty of fruit, citrus, and pine. Citrus maybe a little bit because I can kind of get that acidity.
Okay.
A little bit. Fruit, if that's different. I mean, I feel like citrus is a fruit.
It is.
But
I guess, they're kind of looking at...
Fruity, not. I'm not really getting much of that. Pine, I don't know.
See, I wanted to say maybe a little bit, but again, you have an idea of what piney tastes like in your brain, and I don't. So
yeah, there may be a hint of it, like on the back end.
Okay.
You get a little bit of the.
Okay.
And that's kind of coarse.
Tasting.
Interesting.
At
the end.
It's a very interesting adjective. I think I could see that. I don't know that I would have ever pulled that word out, but... Yeah,
I mean, it's probably not the right word. I don't think
it's wrong.
But very good. I think we want to speak on the actual experience of the place a little bit, yes. But you can tell us about it first if you want.
So, 11 Lakes Brewing, like most, started a home brewing journey prior to opening. They started home brewing in 2007. There are 2 gentlemen are the owners, and then, of course, them and their wives are kind of the ones running it. And those two couples are actually neighbors in Huntersville. And so that's how the home brewing started, is they lived next door to each other, kind of got together doing it, moved from their kitchen to their garage and all the neighbors and everything. And it sounds almost like it was like a lemonade stand type of deal out of their house where neighbors would come by walking their dogs and they'd be like, hey, do you want to taste this? And that's kind of how they got feedback. And now that they actually own a brewery, the neighbors are like, but we missed the beer.
Now they got to go pay for it.
Yes. But the brewery opened 2 years ago. They're actually about to have their 2nd anniversary in June, so in just a few more weeks. And the cool thing for me was that when they transitioned from their garage to actually owning the brewery, is the brewery itself is very kind of community built. So the name 11 Lakes comes from the Catawba River being dammed up and creating these lakes, and so there are 11 of them. But the sort of ironic thing was in the Mooresville, Davidson, Cornelius area, 11 Lakes Brewing actually ended up being the 11th brewery to open, which I guess right around when they opened, one was just closing as well, but still in terms of ones that had opened, they were the 11th. But the community kind of came together to help them put the whole thing up. So, as I'm sure we'll talk about in just a minute, the brewery itself is actually in like a storage unit facility. Like it's not in a storage unit, but it's the buildings that are storage units, and they have their own little section carved out of it, like almost as if it were a front office space of the storage place. Mm-hmm. But they came in and decided they wanted to self-fund everything. They didn't want to have to deal with investors and to change who they are and what they were about or any of that. They just wanted to do it. And so aside from actually like furnishing and decorating and designing and all that, it just became kind of a community project, and something that I thought was just actually really cool. And I wished I had known prior to us going was the actual bar top that they have is like a hand-me-down from D9, who was an earlier opened brewery up there. And they made kind of jokes about the styles of beers that they'll make, and they're going to just leave all the sours to D9 because that's more their thing. And like, it's not, I think the entire brewery culture in the greater Charlotte area isn't super competitive, like cutthroat competitive. It's much more of a community and like friendly jabbing type of stuff. And so I just really love that they kind of even take it a step further. Like, oh, we'll do our little thing, you do your little thing, and let us each have our specialties and still work together. I also did just want to mention, we decided to go with 11 Lakes as this week's podcast, just kind of counterbalancing. Last week, we went super south of Charlotte down into the Rock Hill area, and now we're just going to go right up north and hop up there. And yeah. But do you want to start off with our experience that we had there?
Well, yeah, I was going to talk about pulling up to the place first.
That I just ruined?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just how confused we were at first. Because we did not know it was a storage suite.
No, we were actually following the GPS. And I was like, well, there's a road, like, it's telling us to turn up ahead. And I was like, I guess they're in that storage unit. Ha ha.
And they were.
Yep.
And you couldn't really see.
There wasn't a lot of signage or any of that. Yeah.
But we knew it was a brewery when there were people exercising out front. We were like, well, that's not normal for a storage facility.
Yep. Definitely a brewery there. There's people working out.
Yeah.
Which is actually a really cool thing, I think, also to just know, like, there's people exercising. there's beer here.
Yeah.
I think that's a great culture. Love that.
But cool little place. The people there were very friendly.
Not
overly so, though.
Right. I would venture to say this is my favorite experience at a brewery.
Okay.
Like, there was nothing specifically...
Nothing about the look or feel necessarily.
I mean, the look or feel was nice. I enjoyed the way they decorated it and worked with the space because the space itself, being where it is very...
Clean,
straight lines, almost office-y feeling. It's got a very tall ceiling, but it's got, the drop ceiling, like, panels, and it's just very straight, and all those very corporate-looking front glass doors and the whole nine, but you walked in and you're kind of transformed into a different feel of a place, and I respect that they were able to make that happen. But, again, nothing necessarily... grand gesture of, oh, this really exciting thing happened, and so that's why the experience was so great. But we walked in, and the people, it was, I had said to Drew when we walked in, it was literally, I felt like I was walking into an episode of Cheers, where we came in, and it was like, the vibe was that everybody would turn you and go, Norm, and then go back to drinking, where we came in and we ordered a few beers just to sit there and try them, and everybody's sitting around the bar, talked to us for just a minute, but not overly pushy. They talked to us and were super friendly, but didn't overly attach themselves to us. And it was just like real nice, friendly conversation. Talked to the bartender, cool, grabbed a seat, had our beer. And then as we would kind of just sit there and people would come and go and we'd go up to the bartender and back and forth, like conversation was just so easy. The people were like very comfortably friendly, where they were not overly friendly and you're just like, oh God, get me out of here. How do I get away?
Yeah.
And they weren't rude. They weren't standoffish. You didn't feel like you were just kind of sitting there off on an island. It was just the most perfect blend of friendliness that I've seen ever.
Yeah.
And I just was left with a really great feeling after that, which I didn't anticipate.
Yeah. It was because I don't like people to talk to you the whole time. I don't really like people that much.
Says a man who last week said, hey, come talk to us. You like talking to people in the digital sphere.
Yeah. But yeah, it wasn't over the top. They just asked you how your beer was.
Talked to you about flavor profiles.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
He told us he went to the Untapped Festival and had a good time. So put one mark on the tally board for good time.
Still waiting to hear y'all's, so help us tally some. But yeah, overall, just a really great experience.
Yeah, we'll be going back.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, they are having their 2-year anniversary bash, June 1st.
Yeah. So
go check it out. Definitely worth the stop. Definitely worth the drive if you're not
in that area.
Yeah.
And it's not too bad to get to. I mean,
no.
We took from 485.
We took not a back road, but we hopped off of 77 because.
Yeah. It took the first exit off of 77 and then.
Just rode parallel and.
A couple miles.
Yeah. So
you could have even went down to Sanford. Because we crossed over Sanford, but. I mean, not a bad ride.
Yeah. Go check it out. Definitely worth it. The people are great. They've got a good... and this is something I did say too, is we did, as an IPA person, we came in, found 2 IPAs on the menu, and we each ordered one so we could try them both, and then went back because we were just intrigued by some of the other beers and got a flight of 4 very non-IPA different beers. And I don't think I could sit there and drink a full pint of any of them because, again, just not... I'm definitely growing in my flavor range, but I'm just not there yet. But, and I said this when we were there, is specifically could not say that any of them were bad. I think they were all very good. It just wasn't my thing.
Yeah. They had a oatmeal stout that tasted exactly like an oatmeal raisin cookie.
He's not wrong.
Exactly.
And there was a smoked something or other that I said literally I felt like I was at like Renfest or something and walking past a fire pit where they're like actually roasting meats. It literally gave you that aftertaste of like what the air tastes like when you walk past something like that. Just the flavor profiles are so spot on to what they're intended to be that it's so impressive, and everything was just so smooth and so clean feeling. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just not quite the flavor I want when I drink a beer, but they were all so good and well put together. So even if IPAs aren't your thing, absolutely worth going to check it out.
Yeah, and we didn't even have like their Sandbar Blind, which they say is their most popular.
Yeah.
So I heard her saying that. Didn't even try that, but apparently that's a pretty good one too. If you're into those kinds of things.
Also, I didn't say this because I got distracted, but all the water that they brew their beer with comes straight from the lake.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, I'm sure they like filter it, but...
All right. I mean...
Like, that's as local as you can get there.
I guess. I'd rather catch rain.
Well, I reckon if it's gonna rain there, it's just the water from the lake's evaporating and then scooching over a bit.
Sure.
So, that's just natural filtering.
Yeah.
So,
Cornelius.
In honor of 11 Lakes, we're going to talk about Cornelius, which I will say we sort of struggled a bit because it's a relatively small area and it's such a like conglomeration of Cornelius, Davidson, and Mooresville. Huntersville. I do that all the time in my head. But those three are, all right there on top of each other. Yeah. That
you leave one and you're
distinguishing one from the other is really hard. Like the history all just overlaps and is the same, and it is a small area, so it also is not that there's less history there, but it's harder to have recorded history in this tiny little space because there's less to cover, I guess. So I think we've got some good things, but it'll get interesting as we get into more of these 11 breweries plus that live in that area now. So what have you got for us?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and start reaching for stories.
Yeah, I kind of took the rug right out from under you because I went first into my history research.
Yeah. So one of Cornelius's highlights is probably Jetton Park.
Okay.
It's a 104-acre park located right on Lake Norman. They have a beach, but apparently you can't swim.
Okay.
At the beach. So is it a beach? I don't know what that's about. But they have, the basic food areas and picnic tables and things like that. But they also have a waterfront hall where you can have your wedding.
Oh, okay.
So, they just recently redid the building, like built something new there, and it looks pretty great.
Nice.
Like exposed rafters and stuff like that. Pretty cool looking place. So check that out if you're getting married soon.
Or just need to have a fancy party.
Yeah. They got playground, tennis courts, 1.3 mile bike trail, 1.5 mile walking or rollerblading trail.
Hey.
If you're into that.
I mean, we got some friends at the roller derby, so
yeah,
we can get some practice laps in.
Mm-hmm. And a formal garden.
Ooh.
So not a place I want to go to because I will sneeze all day.
Yeah, you will.
But some of that other stuff seems okay. So the park is named after the Jetton family that owned the land where the park is now. They either had a farm or owned the land on the entire peninsula that Jetton Park is located on. Okay. And the peninsula is called Jetton Peninsula.
Whoa. No way. I don't buy
If you've played golf at the Peninsula Club, that's on the Jetton Peninsula.
What?
There's also like Peninsula Yacht Club.
Ooh.
Sounds fancy.
Do they have a gray sloop?
Maybe. not really.
I mean, it is all up in that neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Very well could.
So,
can we get a gray sloop and name it Gray Sloop?
I mean, yeah. I don't see why you could.
I think that's excellent. I'm such a nerd. Carry on.
Yeah. And we can make it where you can pull the motorcycle right up onto it.
Yes. Anyway.
So one of the members of the Jetton family was John Lewis Jetton. John Lewis was a lieutenant in the Confederate Army. He also served as a representative in the North Carolina House of Representatives.
All right.
From 1873 to 1875, and then again in 1891 to 1893. Now, the reason I brought his name up, and here's where the reach comes in.
All right.
He is part of a conspiracy.
Ooh, you have my attention. I like those.
So, and you'll really like this because it's about a French fella.
Ooh. Je parle français?
Nope. I don't know if I'm saying his name correct, but Michel?
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 Mm-hmm.
How'd you say it? Michel?
More or less, yeah.
Michel Ney was a marshal and the right-hand man for Napoleon Bonaparte. Once Napoleon was defeated and dethroned, Ney was arrested and allegedly executed.
Allegedly.
So
we're talking in France right now. We're not talking.
Yeah, we're not
here. We haven't gotten to here yet. Okay.
So allegedly executed.
Okay.
There's even a famous painting called "The Execution of Marshal Ney" by Jean-Léon Géron.
That's actually not bad.
Depicting the execution.
Okay.
So there's like some dude laid out on the ground and some French soldiers walking away.
All I'm imagining is Ned Stark's head in the middle of.
Well,
GOT.
His head was still attached.
Dang. All right.
But he was executed.
Mm-hmm.
Allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
Seems pretty straightforward, though.
Sure.
You know.
I mean, yeah, so far.
But there are some theories that he escaped to America. And went by the name of Peter Stewart Ney. And this is where our boy John Lewis Jetton comes in.
All right.
John Lewis was quoted in a book with the title of Historic Doubts as to the Execution of Marshal Ney.
Ooh, okay.
Because he was a student of this Peter Stewart Ney. So I'm guessing Peter Stewart Ney, I don't know what school exactly he was at.
Sure.
But was a teacher, and John Lewis had him as his teacher. So not much is known about Peter Stewart Ney.
Mm-hmm.
But we do know that he was an immigrant from France who fought in the French Revolution. The quote...
So he's from France, and he's got some military history.
Yes.
Okay.
The quote of John Lewis that is in this book was recalling a story that Peter Ney told him and his classmates about a time the enemy was preparing for an attack from his fellow officer. So, you know, back in the day, very gentlemanly.
Yes.
Front to front, you know, face on battles.
Right.
Enemy was preparing for an attack from his fellow officer, and he kind of blindsided the enemy.
Okay.
Told the story about that, and John Lewis found a book in the Davidson library where it was called Napoleon and His Marshals, and depicted almost Peter's story word for word.
Ooh.
And the marshal who was in charge of this certain battle was Marshal Ney.
Ooh.
And according to John Lewis, the sketch of Marshal Ney was an exact likeness of our teacher Peter.
Ooh. I like it. Tricky. I think Homeboy Artist was just there to be the setup to, like, you know, there wasn't quite photography and all that. So he made this painting just to be like, nah, see, it's recorded. It happened.
Yeah. And that's how they had to do it back in the day. Paintings.
Yeah. That's what I always love. Like, one of my favorite things to do is just go through the internet and, like, I can't even specifically get on Tumblr myself, but like I'll just Google or like Pinterest screenshots of Tumblr comment conversations. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I love is they're like, they call us the selfie culture and that we're so obsessed with ourselves, whatever. At least we didn't pay people thousands of dollars to show up at our house and stare at us for hours to paint us.
Yeah.
Like,
that's true.
And I was like, you're not wrong.
That's true.
Anyway, sorry.
So I guess there's like one other thing that, you know, is a clue for this guy being the marshal.
Aside from sketchy proof of death, exact likenesses and stories existing elsewhere. Okay.
So whenever he died, well, there was little known about his life prior to being a teacher. Okay,
that was going to be the question.
Yeah.
Which one, quote, air quotes, are we talking about?
Yeah, Peter.
Okay.
Not much is known about him prior to being a teacher and showing up. Mm-hmm. But when he died, his gravestone revealed that he was born the same year as Michelle Ney. Mm-hmm. And the gravestone states, a native of France and soldier of the French Revolution under Napoleon Bonaparte.
Dude, it is totally the same person.
See, I didn't look all this up, but there is a guy who disputes this and says that the evidence of his actual execution is there's too much there to be not true. Saying that they would have had to have switched him out with somebody else because somebody died.
I mean, yeah, but that's not Marshal Ney. Unheard of.
Yeah. And he went back and searched, and there was a Peter.
See, that kind of stuff is like super not unheard of during those times, and you could get away with it because we didn't have DNA testing and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh, there was a body, looked kind of the same. Sounds good. Yeah. And there wasn't, not even social media, but like media at all to have photos of people to say like, oh, I knew this Marshal Ney guy was, you know, brown haired, about this tall. Cool.
Well,
and that's all you know.
He was actually a very well known.
But still.
Yeah, he was Napoleon's number 2.
Right, I get that. But still, how precise are all of your visuals of him?
He was called, they called him basically Ginger. Because he was different than most. So it'd be kind of hard probably to.
I don't think so. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I think this guy has evidence. I didn't look at all his evidence of why he's saying that Peter is his own person.
I don't buy it.
Yeah.
Peter's a fraud.
It's one thing that could point either way of they just played this out as a bigger story so that you would not question it. But apparently when whoever was executed that day refused to wear a blindfold and wanted to give the order to fire himself.
Interesting.
So.
Interesting.
I don't know. But kind of a brave gesture.
I mean, yeah. I've read something too of, oh no, I didn't read it. I listened to this other podcast by these two British, well, the one girl's this British girl I watch on YouTube, and then it's her friend who I think is actually Danish. I'm not quite sure. But they have a podcast, and it's kind of a let's look at women in history and different stuff like that. And they were talking about this woman who refused to wear a blindfold, and instead of like reacting in fear to the firing squad, like blew them a kiss as they shot her down. And just
So they didn't have her tied up either?
They did. But it was
how'd she go?
I mean, she didn't use her hand, but you could still like pucker and kiss at someone, you know?
I reckon.
But it was just the cool strength behind it. And especially you don't really hear about women being under a firing squad often. So anyway, I think Peter's. Well, she wasn't claimed for being a witch. Oh. We're not in Salem.
So
I think Peter's full of it.
Maybe, but we'll never know. So that's our that's kind of my tie-in to Cornelius. Some dude from Cornelius said something about some dude, and that's how it's related to Cornelius.
But it's interesting.
Yeah, but luckily enough, it was a big-time Cornelius name that they even named a park after his family. So it makes sense. It works, right?
Yeah. And it was a nice plug for the area and some weddings and some festivities.
Yeah, I tried to give it a little more.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm going to go much more real and much more almost basic, though. I'm just going to go into the actual history of how Cornelius itself was created and like why it's distinguishable from Davidson and Huntersville and all that. And just a little bit about, I guess, behind the name of Cornelius.
Cool.
So Cornelius itself was founded in 1893, and then it was officially incorporated in 1905. Not really sure what the difference is. I mean, I guess I do, but not like really down to specifics. But nonetheless, it was named after the financial backer of the town's cotton mill. And I'm going to get into that a little bit in a minute. But basically, what happened is Davidson existed at whatever point. And there are these two cotton firms, or cotton buyers, I guess. There was the R.J. Stowe Company and the Sloan Brothers. And so they each had their own weighing machines and their own mechanisms, and so they would buy cotton from all the farmers, and there was this kind of it seemed fine, I think, and then Charlotte proper hired an official, like, government hired cotton weigher, like made that a position, and from there it became a topic of debate in the surrounding areas. And so specifically, since there were two firms kind of going head to head in Davidson, it became a hot button issue of, should we have an official weigher? Does that take out less possible corruptness in the area? So what should we really do about it? And so those two firms, surprisingly, ended up on the opposite ends of the spectrum, where Stowe wanted to keep weighing his own materials, and the Sloan Brothers were in favor of somebody else being appointed and just handling it for everybody. And so there were elections over it. It ended up that they voted for a town official weigher, and there was new legislation written, like it was a whole big shebang for that to happen. And Stowe still just really didn't like it, and so he moved his weighing materials, his scales and all of that, just outside of Davidson city limits, and just like bought some property, put all of his stuff there, and he kept his like the main part of his business still in Davidson, but kind of had that outside of town. And so it left a good bit more people working with Sloan for a little bit, with the Sloan Brothers. And then, after a while, where Stowe had put his scales and everything outside of town was more or less at the bottom of this big dirt hill that went up into Davidson. And so over time, this hill became much more muddy and a little more treacherous. And so a lot of the farmers coming into town were just like, I don't really want to risk it. It's kind of dangerous. It's a pain in the butt. Like, I don't want to deal with all this. I'd much rather just deal with the scales that are right here at the bottom of this hill. And, you know, they knew there was the potential for it not to be weighed as fairly, but it was easier and less treacherous. So it kind of worked out either way. Like, it made it worth it. So Stowe ended up with significantly more business at that point. And from there, the more time he spent building up his business in that front, he said, you know what, we really need to have an actual cotton mill here to produce the material straight away. Like, there's no point in continuing to have things all over the place. We can just kind of one-stop shop it here. Mm-hmm. And so he thought it would be the perfect idea for the area, everything else, but he didn't have the money for it. So he knew someone who did. Mm-hmm.
He knew people?
He knew people. So he got connected with our dear friend, Joe B. Cornelius. JB. And he provided the funds for this cotton mill. And the rest is pretty much history. The town flourished around that mill. We've spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about mill villages. And kind of that same thing. It just helped expand the entire area. And from there, it became its official town and all of that. And so the J.B. Cornelius never actually lived in the Cornelius area.
Okay.
But since it was basically his funding that made the town possible to exist, they decided to honor him with the naming of it. So that's kind of the history of the town itself. And I just wanted to dive slightly deeper into J.B. Cornelius himself. There's plenty I could actually say about Stowe as well, but I'm going to save that for a later podcast because, like we said, there's not a whole lot to go on with that area. But Cornelius himself was born on September 1st in 1833, and he died on October 23rd in 1914. He's actually originally from Iredell County.
Okay.
Which
right
I said,
the corner.
Yeah, which I said right.
Yeah, this time.
Yep.
Iredell.
Shh. As of a book that was written in 1971, so I can't, guarantee for it now, 50 years later, but as of that point at least, his original house was still standing.
Okay.
I have to say, put all these kind of at this time, just because he's
well, that was almost 50 years ago now.
Yes. But, even as someone as significant that a town is named after him, there's so little information about him that there's not even a Wikipedia page on this guy, which, there's Wikipedia pages on freaking everyone.
There's going to be one on me soon.
Oh, goodness.
I'm going to make it.
Oh, goodness. But, especially in our world that we live in, if you don't have a Wikipedia page, you didn't exist.
Yeah.
Really. And so that was actually pretty shocking to me. And so I'm going off of typewriter typed up and scanned into a computer documentation here, which is why it's from 1971. So I'm not sure if that building still stands. I'd love to dig really deep, go to maybe the Cornelius Public Library or something would have something there that would give us a more precise location, and then wander around and see if you can find one of your signs that you like, and check it out. But right now, that's all I have to go off of. Yeah. So, some fun facts about him. As a boy, he lost an eye to a plowing incident. I don't really know how that's possible. I don't know what you do to lose an eye while you're plowing, but granted, I've never plowed, so what do I know?
Well, I guess when you're going through
in the dirt, early 1900s, you can
pop a rock up.
I guess. Yeah, because we're talking mid to late 1800s.
Yeah.
So,
you pop a rock, pop rocks.
Yikes. So he lost an eye to a plowing incident. He had a brother who died in the Civil War. He himself did not participate because of only having one eye. Mm-hmm. He was an elder at Mount Zion Methodist Church. We learn about what we know mostly about Cornelius is that he was a very generous and wealthy man. Where specifically his wealth came from is a question mark to me. But he was very philanthropic with his money. So he sent a missionary to Japan for 5 years.
Okay.
Which, also, again, he lived from 1833 to 1914. So in that time frame...
So probably 2 years of that was traveling to and fro.
Also that. But the sheer cost of what that is, I imagine how immense that is. And so he did that. He gave $10,000 to children's homes in Winston-Salem. And I believe that was $10,000 in his time, not our time. So again,
you didn't do the math.
No, I did not. So again, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And maybe what I thought was the most interesting thing, because again, he's 1833 to 1914. If you consider that time frame, like women didn't have the right to vote until like 1919, I think was, or 1920. I always confuse it because women's suffrage, it's either the 19th or 20th Amendment, and then it's either 1919 or 1920. And that's why I always confuse the two.
20th.
Because one of them is 20 and one of them is 19, and I always confuse which one's which.
Oh, no, maybe it was 19.
I think it was 1920 and the 19th Amendment.
Yeah.
Is what I really believe it is.
Because 21st Amendment was the
I want to say like prohibition.
Yeah, okay. Prohibition. I couldn't find that word.
Okay. I was like, I think that's what it is, but I'm afraid to say it and be super wrong. Because I know 13, 14, 15 are the Reconstruction, start of the Civil Rights type of thing. I'm like 99% sure it's 19th Amendment, 1920 is when that was ratified. But because they're so close, I'm constantly switching them around. But, so we're still, regardless, we are pre-woman suffrage by several years at his death, let alone the rest of his lifetime. And so what I thought was the most interesting thing is there's a foundation, the Joe B. Cornelius Foundation, where they provide scholarships for women to go to college.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that was really cool and really interesting. And again, as a woman,
Maybe he had like a dumb wife. And he's like, y'all need to go to school.
God, you're the worst. Y'all, help me beat this man up in the comments, please.
That's probably it.
You are a terrible human being.
He's like,
don't worry, guys. I go to CrossFit and he doesn't. I will whoop his butt when these cameras turn off.
Y'all need some schooling.
I think that goes the other way these days. Y'all let us get educated and y'all got dumb as a brick.
You wish.
I don't have to wish, it's true. Anyway, so I just thought that was really cool that he also spent a lot of time and money helping, women, helping children, helping missionaries. Like he was just such a philanthropist, helped promote this cotton mill to develop this town, and seems like a really stand-up guy. And he doesn't even have his own freaking Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
I mean, what the heck, guys?
Old JB. Cornelius.
Yeah. And that's pretty much what I've got. There's plenty of other kind of key players in this era. Probably going to save some of them for some of these later breweries when we get to them. But
because we got to, what are there? There's like 4 or 5 right there in the same area.
Yes.
So we need stories for that because I'm already reaching.
Right. We might get to a point where we are sort of just making that conglomerate of Huntersville, Davidson, and Cornelius.
North Meck.
Yeah. I'm not totally positive what breweries exist in all 3 of those areas. So it may be something that we do the best we can and then start divvying it out to the greater area. Which at this point, like I said, is Cornelius and Davidson for the longest time were the same town, and then it just sort of scooched people outside of town.
Yeah, and we might could even start reaching into Iredale a little bit. That's right on the other side.
But this is where you guys come into play too. If you're from that area, if you are familiar with it, we're only as good as the internet and what we can get, by going to libraries and that kind of stuff. But personal experiences and personal, like, family passed on stories are huge, and we would really, really love to hear them. And even if you just wanted to point us in a direction, if you don't have all the details, I mean, any of that would be awesome, and we would love to give you that credit and research your ideas deeper. So get over on YouTube if you're not there and just leave us some comments. And like he said last week, we have 100% response rate right now. So
It's very solid, 100%.
Yes. Plus, we go to breweries every week to test beers and bring them home to podcast about. So, beer. Come meet us for beer.
Yeah.
Any last comments or things you want to add in this week? I feel like it was a really light week in terms of stories, but...
Well, luckily, we liked 11 Lakes enough to talk more about it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was truly an incredible experience. And which seems so simple because there was nothing outrageously like, oh man, they gave us all this free stuff. But like, it was nothing like that. It was just real people being real, which you don't realize how rare it is until you experience it. You're like, oh, that was just amazing.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. So thank you guys for coming back another week.
Like, comment, subscribe.
All the things.
Yeah. Tell your mama if you didn't tell her last week. If you forgot a Mother's Day present, then
send her us because, that's what everybody wants.
Yeah. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah. Happy late Mama's Day, mamas. Yeah. So, thanks as always, and we'll see you all next week.
Chicken leader.
Bye.